For the final session of today, we have Mr. Matt Sweetwood, CEO, business consultant, keynote speaker, and author. Matt Sweetwood is a man of many dimensions. He is a CEO, business consultant, a keynote speaker, a turnaround specialist, and an author. Matt is a deep expert in market dynamics and consumer insights in fast-moving electronics and high-tech industries. He is well recognized for turning around struggling businesses, driving revenue, and conducting market outreach in challenging and declining retail industries. Matt is a regular contributor on national TV and to several publications in the business, parenting, ethics, and politics arenas. Welcome, sir.
Social media is not something you do, it's a lifestyle. So if you think I'm just going to post here and there and I'm going to look here and there, you're not going to grow your following. If you're not sure what to do, go look at what the competition is doing.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. Since we're all over the place, let me just tell you that I am coming to you from the beautiful city of Miami in the United States, and I am thrilled to be here. And before I begin my talk, I just want to talk a little bit about career change and finding the way in the career. I've spoken at many career conferences, and sometimes I think the hardest part about finding a job is really, or hardest part about, improving in your career is the psychological part. And you're going to see as I walk you through my talk that no matter what difficulties you face or how down you get in your life or if things look very difficult, there's always a way to pull yourself out. So here we are in the morning here in the United States. I'm sure we're in all different time zones across the world. And I want to give you a little inspirational message for today that will allow you to go out and just really win. So with that, let me sort of walk you into my talk. I'm going to share my screen and you'll be able to follow along the little picture presentation I'm going to give you with my talk. Okay, let's see here. Let's do this. And I think everybody should be able to see that. I was standing in the construction zone of my new 60,000 square foot office and warehouse facility in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. We were moving our business a few miles from where it had been into a new facility with the idea of reimagining a relatively large business. My cell phone rang, but I could barely hear the voice on the other end through all the construction noise. It was my wife. She didn't speak at first, or at least I couldn't exactly hear her. But when I finally could hear her, I realized she was hysterical, alternating between screaming and crying. I did something really bad. She said. I replied, "What did you do?" There was silence again. She screamed one last time. I did something really bad to Ethan, and then she hung up the phone. I was stunned, frozen for all of about 2 seconds. Then, grabbing my car keys from my pocket, I ran out of the warehouse and jumped into my 1996 BMW E36 M3. Car fans out there maybe know what that is. Jamming the keys into the ignition and bolting down the side roads of New Jersey, running red lights, running stop signs, weaving around the typically congested New Jersey traffic, using all of the skills I had learned on the racetrack. Quite frankly, the thought that my wife had killed our son Ethan was all I could think about. And what about the other 4 kids? Were they okay? Ethan was 7 years old, second oldest of my 5 kids, who at the time were 18 months to 8 years old. That's right, 18 months to 8 years old. I skidded the car to the front of our big house and burst through the front door, but I was confused by what I saw. My 3 youngest were happily playing with each other right inside the front door in the front hallway, like everything was okay. Then I walked into the kitchen where my wife was sitting at the dining table, sobbing hysterically. On the other side of the room was my 8-year-old daughter, Lauren, holding a bloody towel to 7-year-old Ethan's head. I ran to Ethan, pulled the towel away, and saw the gash on his scalp and the broken coffee mug my wife had thrown at his head, broken into pieces on the floor. As I was comforting my son, my wife suddenly stopped crying, and she said to all of us, "The mug just slipped out of my hands." She got up from her chair and started walking to the door to leave. You see, she was in the process of moving out and leaving me to care for the 5 little kids. She stopped, turned towards us, and gave one last finger point at me, and very calmly said, "This is all your fault." You know what? She was right. It was my fault. Obviously, I didn't make her throw the mug at my son, but it was my fault for allowing a person who I knew was unstable and dangerous to be alone with our kids, even if it was the mother. I knew it was the case for almost a year and completely ignored it. As a result of my inaction, my son Ethan got hurt physically and emotionally. I also chose to marry this person, and I chose to have 5 children with her. There are lots of excuses I could make why this happened in my life. I could blame her for manipulating me and tricking me. I could blame my parents. Everybody blames their mom and my lack of experience. I could cry out that I'm just so unlucky and that life isn't fair. But in my crib when I was born, no one put a note in there saying life would be fair. And anyone who's lived long enough knows that you make your own good luck. But it wasn't until I acknowledged my own weaknesses and faults and dealt with them in a constructive manner and stopped blaming others, I was able to grow as a man and ultimately become the father I had the potential to be. Successful people take responsibility for their actions, inactions, and the situations they find themselves in. Now, to finish that difficult story I just told you, that incident was one of the last times my wife was ever in the house. In fact, shortly thereafter, she moved out, never returned, and I became a single dad and solely responsible for the lives of 5 little kids from 18 months old, still in diapers, to 8 years old. So what I'd like you to do is sort of think about this question, right? Because this is at the heart of the talk. It's at the heart of your career. It's at the heart of everything that goes on in your life. So I want you to think about, just in a few words, jot it down. You can chat it to me now or later in the Q&A. Just a few words of how you define personal responsibility for yourself. Now, what's beautiful about being with you today is that I get to speak to you and unpack some of what my own personal life lessons were and business lessons were, and what helped me not just get something through one of the most devastating times I've ever had in my life, but also find success. Okay, now I know that was a very unexpected story. It probably was very rough for you to all hear, or some of you probably might even have some memories that you don't like to recall. So let's take a breath. Take a look at that picture that I have right there. The guy second from the right, the tall one, second from the right, that's Ethan. And as you can see, his head is all good, and so is he. And now getting back to the point, my success, which I'm thankful for every day, and I venture to say my kids are all successful adults today, having graduated top colleges, are financially independent, and I will say, as a proud father, excellent human beings. Now, While all that stuff was going on in my personal life, I previously mentioned to you that I was building a new office and warehouse facility for my business. But if I back up a few years before, when the time when my wife left, I was running a company that was extraordinarily successful. We had over 100 employees and were the kings of the photographic film industry. For those of you out there, when I give a lot of talks, I always mention the word film. And sometimes when I do it in front of a very young audience, people don't know what film is. So I hope you know what film is. You can send me a little note if you remember what film is or you ever used film. And by the way, if you look in that picture, that red arrow right there, that points to me. And if you look pretty closely, I'm not exactly proud of the poor physical condition I was in back then, but more about that later. Okay. My company had a 5% share of the United States film market, meaning 5% of all the rolls of film sold in the United States went through our doors. We were one of the largest distributors of photographic supplies. Probably heard of the brands: Polaroid, Kodak, Fuji. We sold cameras, photographic paper, chemistry, all sorts of photographic accessories. And our customers were primarily small retail outlets such as camera stores, photo labs, tour shops, gift shops, drugstores, who in the 1980s and even into the 90s accounted for about 80% of the photo supplies. And we also sold professional photographers. But as you can guess, talking about personal responsibility, there probably was trouble for me ahead. And sure enough, that came in the form of with film sales. I told you we had 5% share of the film market. And if you look at the red line in that graph, right, the graph has we like graphs, has a nice steep curve there. Well, that line represents the introduction really of digital photography. And the blue line is camera film sales. And as you can see, the very heart of our business was being eliminated quickly. We did transition to selling digital cameras. That's what I always said. Well, didn't you sell digital cameras? But there was a problem there too. It's called the smartphone. We all have them, right? We're all walking around. They have beautiful 3 cameras on the back and, big camera on the front, and 4K video and all sorts of things. Well, that smartphone had the same effect on the digital camera as digital sales had on film. The small stores, in particular, the local drugstores, who were a big part of our business, were being bought up by the large chains. I don't know in the countries you're in, but I'm sure that these large, photo pharmacy, sort of general department stores come in and they hurt the little stores in the area. And digital imaging caused the 1-hour photo lab where you take your film to be developed to go out of business. You didn't have to develop film or print pictures anymore. And the smartphones, as we said, were the final death blow for the camera business. The number of camera stores in the United States went from 10,000 to a few thousand to a few hundred. And actually today, there's barely 100 that are actually powerful, that actually accomplish anything. So it was time to reimagine my business, or failure was going to be fast approaching. Now, I know I said our customers were camera stores, and I also said they were going out of business in droves, but reimagination requires aggression, guts, and out-of-the-box thinking. And that also requires reimagination sometimes with your career, to really take a look at what you've done in your career and how maybe you can pivot that to something that is extremely desirable in the job market. So I had a new idea for a camera store, okay? It wasn't based on price. It wasn't based on salesmanship. It was based on education and providing an unparalleled retail experience for our customers. As an example, we created an in-store photography education program that could bring 1,000 people a month in the store. And within 5 years, we became one of the most highly recognized brands and one of the largest single location stores in the country, twice awarded top retail store in the whole United States. We actually transformed the retail store business, and eventually that successful camera store that model is used by every successful camera store today. And my reward, for those of you who've ever run a business, and my reward for a business that almost failed several times, I ended up with a $100 million company that I got to successfully exit in 2015. And what that means is I got bought out. Okay. Now, here's a principle that applies to business, but it also applies to human beings. And if you want your business or yourself to be successful over the long haul, and I'll say it again, if you want your business or yourself to be successful over the long haul, You most certainly will have to reimagine yourself or your business at some point. I can guarantee it. Now, let me say something about timing. So the question is, even if you're in a career that's going well or you're running a business that's going really well, when do you reinvent yourself? I'm going to give you an interesting story from my industry. And that was back in the early 2000s. I was in the CEO's office of the Eastman Kodak Company. They were a Fortune top 10 company, one of the largest, most successful companies in the world, gilded brand. And at that time, we were one of their largest customers. And they were showing us a forecast of film sales over the next 10 years. They showed us this nice gradual decline of film sales. They said, you got 10, 20 years, it's going to go out. I mean, after all, they had an 85% share of the film market, and they became one of the greatest American companies off those film sales and invention. Unfortunately for them, as you saw the previous graph, film sales fell off a cliff. And in January 2012, they declared Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's hard to imagine. The interesting point in the story for us is that Kodak, ready for this, invented the digital camera and the imaging sensor. They were afraid to disrupt their cash cow of film and bring it to market too quickly. Canon, Nikon, Panasonic, and Sony, of course, had no such issues and ultimately crushed Kodak. And I can think of no bigger demonstration of lack of reimagination, and the resulting consequence is that Kodak in 2008 owned the Kodak Gallery, which had 60 million users and billions of photos online. After Kodak's bankruptcy in 2012, they sold the Kodak Gallery to Shutterfly, their main rival, for a little over $24 million, a small amount of money in that scheme of things. And here it is. And almost 3 months to the day from when Kodak filed bankruptcy in 2012, another startup with a similar idea to the Kodak Gallery, but with only 27 million users, less than half of Kodak's gallery, was acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. Does anyone know the name of that startup? If you know it, chat it or write it down. See if you got it. It was Instagram. And that amazing flip of culture and business from one giant to the next within months is remarkable. And it screams out about the death of a company because of its failure to reimagine itself when it had the chance. I know someone who was in the boardroom of Sony when their technical department presented a concept of a small, handheld, point-of-view action camera. At the time, Sony had over 65% share of the market, a video business. The board and the C-suite execs rejected the idea because they didn't want to cannibalize their existing camcorder business. 5 years from that date, GoPro, who didn't exist while that board meeting was going on, had the 65% share of the video market. And as of last year, GoPro owned 89% of the action camera market. Okay. The best time to reimagine yourself or your business is when you are at your peak, when you're at your best. If you wait too long, it may be too late. I'm going to say that again. The best time to reimagine yourself could be right now when you're in an actual job or a career that you really like, because you never know what's coming down the road and you want to be prepared. And if you wait too long, it may be too late. Let me go back to my personal side a little bit. You remember what I look like in that picture of my company. Now, none of this was the case for me personally when that incident happened with my son. Not only did my business need a reinvention, but I was also at the lowest point in my life. I was in pain, internal pain. Pain, it woke me up every day, putting my feet on the floor and beginning each day and having that feeling of dread. Can you imagine that every day? And the dread, it was always there. What I was feeling, going into the bathroom, looking in the mirror and seeing my blonde hair, right? For those of you that see me now, that actually, there was blonde hair. I got the picture, I got the proof right there. Well, it was disappearing. And my morbidly overweight 300-pound body on a 5'10" frame was getting heavier day by day. I think in kilos, right? What was I, 70 kilos or something like that? 70 kilos. So very, very, very bad situation. So I was a guy in my 30s who, when you looked from the outside, if you looked outside, people who worked for me, friends and everything, you saw a pretty smart blonde wife. I had 5 adorable blonde-haired kids. Everything looked great. Okay? I lived in a big fancy house in the suburbs. But inside that home was anything but love, happiness, or contentment. My wife, attractive woman on the outside, was really troubled and confused. And that led her to eventually leave us for good. And me, I'm just a poor dummy coming home every day from work, like lots of us, working my ass off. I was trying to create a business that was having challenges and on the edge of going bust. Always seeming 30 days away from having no cash flow. You heard about those those changes, disruptions in the market, technology, all sorts of business conditions, and only 30 days maybe from not making payroll, which actually bothered me the most, right? When you have 100 lives, 100 people whose careers and lives depend on you, and you don't know how you're going to pay them. Trust me, it's not a really good place to be. So imagine I had a wife on the edge, a business on the edge, 100 lives at work depending on my decisions, and 5 little kids looking up at me, depending on me alone to bring home the bacon and make this somehow a happy place to live. A lot to handle for a young man. And that all led me to that very unhealthy and out of shape 300 pounds through emotional eating. I could barely walk up a flight of stairs, let alone find the energy and strength to take care of 5 little kids. Work 16 hours a day, make the tough decisions, and deal with the enormous stress. Now, during those lowest moments, I had no clue how I would find the energy and the time to manage all of this. The stress of it all. I'll bet it's even a little bit stressful for you to hear my stories. But don't worry, I'm speaking to you today because I did figure it out, right? I don't look like I'm out of shape right now. I'm actually in really good shape. And I'm about to share with you some of the tips and tricks that helped me dig my way out of a difficult mess and my life and business we're in. And hopefully, that can be true for you too. Okay. So I'm going to ask you all a question. Right? Many of you, most everybody finds themselves under stress, difficult circumstances. So this is one to chat in, or we can talk about later, in the Q&A. How do you manage from a time and energy perspective all that's going on in your life right now? Think about that. It's a really important point because without the right time and energy management, there's very little chance you're going to make it big. So I set a goal of allowing myself to be body painted in public at a trade show in New York City. And I had in my mind, about 6 or 8 months to do it. So I did the very hard thing of losing 100 pounds. Okay. That's about 40 something kilos. Hitting the weights, eating better, sleeping better, and focusing on it each and every day. And getting in shape gave me back my mojo, my strength. It gave me the confidence I needed to be successful. Why does it matter? Why do you need to be in really good physical condition, right? It's true if you want to have the energy to hunt for that job, to be really excellent in your job, to just sort of have the strength and the will. And I'm going to give you an example from American football. Imagine you're watching a football game. 2 teams, these happen to be rivals. They're close to each other in New Jersey. It's the Jets and the Giants. They're both New Jersey, New York teams. The game is even 10-10. It's the middle of the last quarter, the 4th quarter. But the team in white and green, the Jets, played a tough game Thursday, this sort of a few days before. And so we see that the team in the green and the white starts to tire physically first. But how do we know that? Ironically, and this applies to any sport, by the way, ironically, it isn't that they start getting outplayed. Not at first. It's that all of a sudden, they take a stupid penalty, or they miss a coverage, or they just forget the play call. And the same thing implies personally and in business. You want to be ready for anything, mean and lean and clear thinking, and able to handle any stress or problem that comes along? Well, there's no better way to do it than put yourself in good physical health. And this is one, if not my favorite principle of personal responsibility. So why did being healthy and physically strong help me be successful as a person? because physical conditioning is the foundation for emotional and mental strength. I'll say it again. So important. Physical conditioning is the foundation for emotional and mental strength. If you want to find the best career, the best job that you can, put yourself in really good physical condition. You will appear stronger and more successful as you go through it, and have the strength and have the time and energy to be able to do it. When my wife left us and I was battling to save my business and my kids, it was one of the loneliest times of my life. I was depressed. I was feeling desperate. I thought I'd be alone with these heavy burdens for the next 20 years. For many of us who've been through divorce or death of someone close to you, if you've lost your job, you've been in a business, right? Let's say you're a solopreneur, like an accountant or lawyer, whatever you do, many times we feel alone there. Loss of a job is something that is really devastating. And when I look back on some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my life, including marrying the wrong woman or making decisions in business with partners or consultants, they were made out of fear of being alone or going it alone. It wasn't until I learned or gained the skill of learning to love being alone, that I was truly able to gain control of my decisions, both personally and professionally, and avoid mistakes I made in the past. Now, I must admit the fear of being alone was a hard thought process to break, because we all feel lonely at times. But I approached it logically. When I was alone, I could focus on getting in shape and eating what I wanted, which was really important for me. It really is important for me today. And I developed a habit from that of, even though I'm not alone now, not alone in terms of personal life, those habits have carried with me. I could do the things I always wanted to do, but maybe my partner didn't. I could express myself more freely through my writing and my photography. I can make my living space exactly how I like it, arrange the furniture, do whatever I want. I could come and go when I wanted. I could be social or network with whomever I wanted. I had lots of could do's and very few could not do's. Think about that. There are some significant advantages of being alone. And so the freedom of being alone is something anyone can learn to love. So successful people learn to love being alone and work alone. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be on a team and be a good teamwork member, but also having the skill of loving to be alone and working alone is extremely important. Unsuccessful people, like I was at one point, let the fear of being alone force them into bad decision-making and depression. If you learn to love being alone, you will be free. And now, speaking of relationships, I can think back to some of the biggest failures I've had. And one thing that seems to be in common with all of them is that they are attached to bad relationships. Obviously, a marriage is a bad relationship that leads to failures, but it also happens in business, right? And you can think about coworkers who you let in close or you team up with and so on. And I can remember the business that I bought and merged into my company where I knew the owner was not such an honest person, but I wanted his business badly and I ignored his reputation. And sure enough, the business failed, the one we brought in, and the dude ended up trying to steal my customers from my own computer. So we all have friends that annoy us or just use us, coworkers that just use us, make us feel bad when we're around them. We have been around people that treat other people poorly, right? They treat their coworkers poorly, right? Even maybe managers. We've had relationships, both personal and business, that causes pain. So successful people choose their relationships carefully and remove anyone from their lives who is not a positive force. Unsuccessful people allow negative, dishonest, and unproductive people close to them. And I'm going to talk a little bit mystical now. I'm going to talk about a little bit of karma, right? You're going to receive positive karma if the people around you are honest, kind, and hardworking. And it'll be negative, leading you to failure if you hang around people who are unkind, dishonest, or lazy. It's a guarantee, right? It's karma. With certainty, I'll say that a person's success is married to the quality of people they allow in their lives. So successful people only allow high-quality individuals into their business and personal lives. And I'll just add one little corollary to that. And of course, the standard you apply to others should also to apply to yourself, at least double magnification. You want to be around kind people, be extra kind to yourself, right? Be extra kind yourself to other people. You want to associate with honest people, then be scrupulously honest yourself. And of course, if you want to be around people who try their very best, you should try being your best and the hardest working person on the team. People ask me, I give talk like this, I have this sort of impactful story. I've got a bunch of impactful stories. And one of the questions I always get asked, and probably get asked at the end here, is what was one of the most important factors in finding success through all of those challenges and that inspiring story? And I'll usually answer a bit of divine intervention, God's hand, mixed with relentless hard work, not only in business, but in trying to be a good father to myself and to my 5 kids, and be a good human being, and so the goal is to lead your pack by example. Successful people are kind, honest, and relentless in their work ethic and lead by example. Unsuccessful people let others outwork them. So be kind, be honest, outwork everyone. Ready for it? Relentless people rarely fail. Be relentless. When I was going through those difficulties, needless to say, my schedule was jam-packed. Time management was an issue. I actually give a talk on time management, how I handled it all. And finding time for anything but kids and work, right, was very hard. But in my heart, I wanted to help others. But I always say to myself, I'd get to them when things got easier and I had more time. How many people out there have said, I'm going to do charity work, I'm going to go do this and so on, but I don't really have the time. When I have more time, I'm going to do it, right? Because we can always find an excuse not to do something. But it wasn't until a friend from the photography industry told me about a nonprofit organization that used photography to help war veterans and also children with special needs. They were in trouble. The nonprofit was in trouble, and they needed someone who knew how to fix things. I reluctantly volunteered, and I will say it changed my perspective on everything that I had gone on in my life. Helping children who are on the autism spectrum, veterans of all ages from all the branches of service who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, were all benefiting from what I was maybe a small part of. Seeing others overcome even greater difficulties than I had experienced changed my perspective on my own circumstances and gave me a sense of gratitude that allowed me to release my own pain from the past. Successful people are charitable and help others in need. Unsuccessful people only focus on themselves. Successful people find a way, no matter how busy they are, to help others in need. They pay it forward, right? We've all heard the expression "pay it forward," and I will say something, personally about it. And I mentioned this just briefly, is that helping other people relieves your own internal pain. So in the case, helping someone else with their career or helping them out in your life, I promise, will help you. Now, there's another way to pay it forward that will actually benefit you. Back a century ago, right, because, we can see I've been on Earth a while, I was studying theoretical mathematics in grad school, University of Pennsylvania, right, really good school out of Philadelphia, Ivy League, right, I get to beat my chest, Ivy League. A bunch of us grad students had tuition scholarships, which I did, but it required us to teach mathematics to those poor, suffering undergraduate students. Needless to say, if you're in grad school for mathematics, like I was, right? I'm pretty good at math. But it wasn't until I taught several classes did I gain a deeper understanding of the subject of calculus. Before I taught, my skill level allowed me to be able to do many of the problems in the basic calculus book. You hand me the book, I could figure it out, I would do, most of them I could do. After teaching, I could do them all with ease. In fact, I offered a contest to my students that they would get a quiz grade of an A if they could find a problem in the calculus textbook that I couldn't solve. So it's one of those things, when you learn to teach, you become an expert at what you do. When I decided it was time to start writing articles about my personal and business experience, I hired a teacher to help me write. I started writing more and more, and 100 articles later, I started coaching other entrepreneurs how to write as part of my consulting business, right? Because entrepreneurs want to write. They want to write copy for their business. Maybe they want to write a book. Maybe they want to write business articles and so on. Eventually, my writing skill was good enough for me to write a #1 best-selling book called Leader of the Pack. I'm on, so I get to show it to you all. It's a book. It talks about those stories that I went through in much more detail, and really pushes what we talked about today. Okay. Yep, we got there. Thank you. When I opened the camera store, I previously mentioned we also opened a photography school. It was the driving force behind our success. The problem was, despite many years of selling film and photography accessories, right, I knew very little about photography itself. I didn't even know how to use any camera other than a basic point and shoot. I first started watching the photography instructors almost every class we had. Then I started practicing myself. And once I knew enough, I jumped in and started teaching basic photography. And I genuinely believe the great success of our photography school was because its leader, me, became a teaching photographer. And even today, after exiting the photography business, I shoot professionally. Previously as a Panasonic brand ambassador, and today as one for LG and their smartphones. So I started by really knowing nothing about photography. And in order to transform that camera store, which was an education-based business, I became an educator myself. So from my book, from my business, I learned, and I tell you that a great way to pay it forward and also help yourself is to become an expert, a thought leader, by becoming a teacher. Learn your trade and learn it well enough to be able to teach to other people, and then you'll become an expert, right? So if you do it in an area directly related to your career or business, you'll greatly improve your chances of success. Now, remember, I had 5 little kids depending on me, 100 employees depending on me, and big bills to pay. I wanted my kids and my business and myself to succeed badly enough that I was willing to do whatever it took legally and ethically to make it happen. You have 5 little kids looking up at you and being like, Dad, what are we going to do? Sometimes that meant working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes it meant doing things I hated to do or was afraid to do. But I would ask myself this one question every day. How badly do you want it? Now, everything I told you today, you may have already known, at least in your hearts, right? Most of it you've heard some version of it, maybe some new concepts in there. But the point of my talk is that everything I suggested that you do for your success is within your control. It's all about your control, what you can do. It's your personal responsibility. It took me many years of pain, trial, and error, fighting my fears and realizing that my ability to be successful, no matter what was going on in life, was my personal responsibility and mine alone. So even when events are crazy, things go wrong, things are out of control, you can still make very positive things happen in your life. You can find that job you want. You can do anything you want. It's just a matter of wanting it badly enough. Successful people just want it badly enough. Unsuccessful people aren't willing to do what it takes to win. I want to thank you all for giving me the opportunity today to talk to you. I hope that my talk inspired you to go out and do whatever you need to do, take personal responsibility, and be successful.
That was so amazing, Matt, and so amazing insights for all of us who are listening us live across our channels. And it was uh, a wealth of life experience that you've just compiled in these principles. And uh, personally, I just feel while listening to what you're saying, there's so much of wisdom in every word that you've said, and that wisdom has not come from reading about things. It's come from life experiences, and on that, there are certain things that come to my mind, and I would want to ask questions to you. And there's some great comments from the audience pouring into. So, just a question there. There's this principle that you mentioned. I think it was principle about physical strength,
Yes.
and how the physical strength leads to emotional as well as mental strength. Uh, so there, don't you think it's more of a catch 22? The emotional and the mental strength allows you to work hard towards the physical strength, and the physical strength in turn helps you build the emotional strength. So it's more like the chicken and the egg problem for a lot of people. How do you break that vicious circle is what a lot of people would want to know.
That's an amazing thought, because we all suffer through that. And I'm going to take something that actually comes from scripture, and it goes like this. If you want to do something and you just don't feel like doing it, right, or your heart's not in it, that's really what it's about, is your heart's not in it. You just get yourself and do one thing. Just because doing something, a physical act, right? Picking up this pen is just something you can order yourself to do. Just pick up the pen, right? Your brain can tell you to do that. It doesn't require deep thinking. It doesn't require any kind of emotion to it, right? But gaining emotional strength and gaining mental strength, those are more complex issues, right? So there's something raw about physicality, right? That's where it came from first. So scripture tells us that if you're not in the mood to do something, you don't have the incentive to do it, just start. Right. So the thing that stops you from transitioning to do those physical things, that catch-22 you talk about, is that the physical part's actually the easiest. So instead of sitting at your desk for 8 hours a day, right, you go have lunch. Just giving you a practical example, right? I'm not doing anything. Well, instead of having lunch in the cafeteria, okay, get yourself a sandwich or get yourself something you can eat and go for a walk while you're eating lunch. Okay, that's not exactly going to take you from 300 pounds, from 80 kilos down to 50 kilos, but it's going to put you in a situation where you start. And that's why the physical side is, in general, even though it may seem the most daunting, is actually the easiest to start. If I just tell you, I want you to start being mentally stronger, you're going to look at me like, what? Right? How do I do that? Right? What do I do? But the physical thing is something very easy to do. Just right. You can start in the most simple way. Don't sit at your desk all day. Stand. Right? Get up every 30 minutes and stand. I'm telling you, that first act will get you going. Now, someone chatted a question like, how do I find the time to do this? When someone says to me, I consult people a lot in business, and someone always says to me, I don't have the time to do that. I said, oh, really? That's amazing. You must be so busy. I always say, let's go through your schedule. Right? And it takes about 2 minutes of going through their schedule to realize they have all sorts of time. They're just making choices along the way to not do. And that gets back to my final point, which is really wanting it badly enough. So the person who chatted in and said, how do I find the time to manage business and do this and find time to work out? If you want to be in shape, if you want to be physically strong badly enough, you're going to take something out which is less important, like watching the telly, playing on the internet, on Facebook or Instagram, whatever it is you do, or chatting with friends. You're going to take some time and you're going to figure out how to do it. All right. You can work out, we're in this COVID time now, and for a lot of places in the world, you're stuck at home. I can't get to the gym. There's something called YouTube. You go on YouTube, which is what I did yesterday, and I got this Pilates workout. This guy kicked my butt all over the living room, stretching and bending and stuff. So there's always a way to find that. So what I would say to the person is just start by doing one thing, right? I'm addressing your question and his at the same time. You start by doing one thing. You then figure out how to put that in your schedule and make it a priority. If you want to be in shape badly enough, you're going to find the time to do it. You're absolutely going to find the time to do it. I guarantee it. Be tough.
Interesting. So that brings me to the next question that I have for you. based on your life experience, and you mentioned the journey that you've gone through, there were tough times, and there were times when you had to prioritize the family over business, and at the same time juggle both the things together. What's the thin line where you should strike a balance? Like, I see a lot of successful entrepreneurs not doing too well on the family side, or on the other hand, there are people who are very happy on the family side. Probably they struggle at the business side. So is there a fine balance that you can walk on? And how do you find that balance, that okay, some people could tell themselves that okay, probably I don't want a $1 billion business, I'm happy with maybe a $10 million business. So how do you define that for yourself? Are there any pointers there?
I think that actually the concept, and there's a lot of speakers out there and writers who write on work-life balance who are not going to like me for saying this, but I don't think there's such a thing as work-life balance. I think it's a matter of just handling all of the things in your life that are necessary, right? Because we could phrase that question, how do I handle work, home, fitness, right? Because we talked about the fitness, how do I handle that balance? Well, what it is you just find time for all the things that are necessary, understanding what the priorities are in your life and making it happen. And I will say what made it easier for me, because this question I get asked essentially every time I give a talk and talk about the story. It's like, how did you do it all, right? How did you find the time to do it all? And the answer is you get yourself in physical shape, you have a high energy level, and you keep yourself very organized. And you set priorities and you take care of everything. When someone says that I don't have time for my family, I look at them and I'm saying, well, that means you haven't made them a priority. And if someone says, I have, my wife is this, or my husband is this, and I can't this, and I don't have time, I'm like, well, you're just not organized then, right? You need to be able to organize yourself. And actually, I've written stuff sort of talking about treating your home life a little bit like a business and your business life a little bit like a family. If you sort of view your staff as family, we're in a career summit. So I always like, as a boss, I always like to look at my staff as family members. And that allowed me to see things in them. I have some great stories about how sort of viewing them not like workers, but as family members really did some good things for them and for me. And conversely, at home, you need to be organized at home and run your business away, and you will find time for everything. But really wanting to set that priority, wanting it badly enough, you can make anything happen. Anything happen. I mean, you look, there's a lot of people that we know, well-known people. They have careers, they have family, they have all of those things going on, and you can do it. It doesn't mean that it's easy. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying, oh, I'm sitting here, cool guy sitting here, right, with his pocket handkerchief there, and he's real cool and speaking and everything. It's very hard. Nobody's saying it's not hard, but just if you want success badly enough, those people who are successful want it badly enough and do what it takes. Organize yourself, prioritize, put yourself in shape, work at it, and you can make it all happen. But there's no such thing as balance. I don't even know what that means. Balance to me means that you're taking care of everything. That may mean 70% at home and 30% at work. I don't know what it means, but whatever it is to get everything done, that's the balance.
Interesting. Great thoughts there. So just something that comes to my mind, because you've been into coaching people, and your book is about leadership, and so on and so forth. Do you think being a leader is something that's more of something that's inherent in you, or is it something that can be taught? Like, and if so, then do you really require some kind of an aptitude which is inborn to be a great leader, or is it totally based on your coaching and education and what you learn while you are living your life?
I think it's like anything else in life. There are people who have very natural abilities to lead. There are people that get thrust into leadership roles, right? Who are forced to figure out how to be a leader, right? Because I didn't begin my story as a leader of anything. I was a fool, okay, making mistakes all over the place. And there are those people that really take training well. So I think people fall into all those categories. But ultimately, leadership is within yourself. I believe every individual is capable of being a leader. I actually have a keynote talk I give on finding the leadership lessons. There's leadership lessons, finding within yourself. a really cool talk where I talk about this, where essentially all of those tools exist within you. Sometimes they have to be cultivated, sometimes they have to be refined, sometimes you need a little advice and so on. But I believe that every individual, if they want, notice I use that word, if they want, is capable of being a leader. Everyone.
Interesting. So, Matt, before we close, and we could go on and on, and you've been such a wonderful speaker, and so much to learn from your side. But then, because of the time constraint, before we kind of end, there's this one question that I would want to take from Asif. He asks, what are some of the mistakes that you wish you could have avoided during your journey, if you would want to answer that?
I think, I talked about picking wrong relationships. I talk about all of those things, but I think they all fall under this sort of broad category of learning to trust myself, right? When your gut tells you, right? Your insides tell you not to do something or you need to do something. Try not to be influenced by outside forces. Try not to be influenced by sort of things you hear, or start overthinking and confusing yourself. And so the mistakes that I've made in my life are from not trusting myself. And ultimately, you're the one who's going to be responsible for your actions, and success will come to you if you learn to trust that internal voice in you, which tells you really what to do or what the right thing to do is. So that's my big advice that I guess I'll leave you with today, is learn to listen to that voice inside you. It typically guides you right, and learn to trust yourself.
Wow, such a wonderful insight. And on that note, heartfelt thanks from all of us here for
Thank you.
taking out the time and sharing your life journey. It was such an inspiring talk, and I'm sure to all those who would be listening to this, it would be a wonderful life journey that you've shared, and so much of lessons in it. Thanks a lot for sharing that with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure. I love being able to speak to audiences all over the world. And I would say, if you want to reach out to me, social media at @msweetwood, M and my last name Sweetwood, at @msweetwood or msweetwood.com. I promise if any of your audience reaches out to me, I will respond to them.
Wow. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot.
Business has a bigger impact on society.